Welcome to the Scrum Framework Simplified. We're going to take a look at Scrum and I'm going to show you what exactly it's about and give you a precise definition for each step of Scrum. There are three roles in Scrum: the product owner, the Scrum Master, and developers. We are going to learn how these folks work on taking complex problems, working to an adaptive solution. As you see on the screen from scrumguides.org, Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. When you talk about Scrum, as someone who has been in the world of predictive quite heavily, I find it easier to train people by showing them what exactly happens in Scrum. So I'm going to show you 6 actions in Scrum. The first action is we log stakeholder requests. This happens outside of the events of Scrum, but it's important for you to conceptualize logging stakeholder requests into a backlog. We call that backlog a product backlog. So that's the first thing I want you to conceptualize. Second thing is you got to plan each iteration for working in Scrum. Third thing, the team syncs up daily. The fourth thing, they prioritize future work. The fifth thing, the work that is done must be inspected by the customer. So inspect completed work. And number 6, adjust and improve. And start again. Plan each iteration. Sync up daily. Prioritize future work. Inspect completed work. Adjust and improve. Now, to put a little bit more meat on the bone, I want to give you a visualization of it. So the sprint is the container for everything that happens in Scrum. The first thing, again, is sprint planning. This is where we plan what we're going to do in the sprint. Then the daily scrums, they happen, it's daily. And this is where we sync up as developers. The developers sync up, they know what each person is working on, they better coordinate, they plan. And eventually, there's going to be some backlog refinement somewhere in the middle of the sprint, because this is our chance to prioritize the backlog for the next sprint coming down the pipe. The next thing that happens is there's a sprint review. The sprint review is where the stakeholders review the completed increment for that sprint. And finally, there's a sprint retrospective where the team looks in the rearview mirror and says, what went well, what didn't go so well, what are we going to improve on, what can we improve on right now, what do we need to improve on in the long term. And that's Scrum in a nutshell. But let's go a little bit deeper so that I can give you some further clarity to the roles and the artifacts of Scrum. So going a little bit further, think about it like this. You've got the stakeholders, right? The stakeholders have these requests, these stickies, and these requests get put into a product backlog. Every sprint planning is the first thing that happens within the sprint. The result of sprint planning is a subset of the product backlog, which is going to be worked on. We call it a sprint backlog. The sprint is 4 weeks or less, and every day of the sprint there's going to be a daily scrum where 3 questions are asked. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What are the impediments that are in your way? In the middle of the sprint, backlog refinement should be carried out with the help of the product owner, at the helm, the developers as well, the Scrum Master, and then an increment at the end of the sprint is derived. That increment will be inspected by the stakeholders, and more stories could be gathered in that meeting. And ultimately, there's going to be a final event, a sprint retrospective, where items for improvement could be identified and implemented, either immediately or subsequently. In Scrum, the product owner's role is to maximize the value of the product resulting from the work of the Scrum team. The product owner is also accountable for effective backlog management. Then we have the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. They help everyone understand Scrum theory and practice, both within the Scrum team and the organization. And then we have developers. The developers, these are the people in the Scrum team doing the work. They are committed to creating any aspect of a usable increment each sprint. They instill quality and hold each other accountable as professionals. Now let's talk about the actual events. A sprint is a fixed time box of 1 month or less. A new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of the previous sprint. Sprint planning initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. This resulting plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. Then we have the daily Scrum, a 15-minute event to inspect progress towards the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog as necessary, adjusting the upcoming planned work. Then we have the sprint review. The Scrum team presents the results of their work to key stakeholders and progress towards the product goal is discussed. The sprint retrospective, the purpose is to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. Last but not least, the backlog refinement event is not a mandatory or identified formal event in the Scrum Guide. The action is carried out by the team and the product owner, but it could happen all throughout and does not need to be an event. But I put it here for you to understand what it is, breaking down and further defining backlog items into smaller, more precise items, an ongoing activity to add details, descriptions, order, and size information to the product backlog items. And in many instances, you hear those items being referred to as user stories, but that's for a different day. Finally, let's talk about the artifacts. We have the product backlog. The product backlog is an emergent ordered list of what is needed to improve the product, which means it emerges on an ongoing basis. It is not like a project plan where everything is spelled out right from the get-go. No, it evolves. It is the single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team. Next, we have the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is a plan by and for the developers. It is a highly visible, real-time picture of the work that the developers plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal. And lastly, we have the increment. The increment is a stepping stone towards the product goal. Each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly verified, ensuring that all increments work together in order to provide usable value. In order to provide value, the increment must be usable. And that, my friends, concludes our review of Scrum. In less than 10 minutes, we have gone through the 3 roles: the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers. We have gone over the 5 events plus the non-formal event of backlog refinement. We have gone through the 3 artifacts. We call these artifacts, by the way, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. I have also pointed you to the mothership for Scrum, where you can get the download for the Scrum Guide. Go on down to scrumguides.org. If you are getting ready for any exam and you need help, you need direction, you need coaching in Scrum, perhaps you're a Scrum Master or product owner, unsure of how to navigate certain terrains, if you need coaching and training, go on down to this site. Let's help you. Thank you very much. Take care and all the very best. Bye for now.